Heat check. Basketball, basketball, college. Basketball, basketball, college. Oh, is that time already? Whoa.
Welcome back to the Heat Check Hangout, your number one source for all things basketball, basketball college. I'm your host, Riley Davis, joined by my co-host, Connor Hope. And today we actually don't have Brian Ralph with us, but you'll notice if you're watching the YouTube feed, we do have a guest. We have Russell Hainline, better known as Duke Better, host of the Duke by the Numbers podcast, and also an acclaimed Hallmark screenwriter. But those of you might be wondering, like, yes, for real, it is me, UNC fan Riley, welcoming in a Duke fan, a Duke Twitter page account owner, nonetheless. But Russell and I, he actually is someone I go way back with on Twitter interactions in the college basketball world. Used to listen to his pod 2.1 Seconds to Madness back in the day. So, but this is really our first time ever doing a podcast together. But how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. This is not for those watching the YouTube, which I strongly recommend, plug. I'm in a hotel room in Palm Springs. I'm not in my normal digs, but, you know, I'm enjoying the desert air, and I'm excited to talk some ACC basketball.
Yeah, Palm Springs, late summer, early fall is I mean, probably second to spring, but at least you missed, hopefully, the summer heat. I don't know. It's been 90 in the Bay Area this weekend. Yeah.
It's real hot.
It was in the 70s. It was in the 70s for like 3 weeks here, and then jumped up. We went to the zoo yesterday, and it jumped up to like 92. All the animals were gone, so we left after about an hour and a half.
Yeah, I was going to go hiking this morning before this, and it was a clean 80 degrees by like 8 a.m. for sure. So yeah, no joke out here in the desert, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah, well, we're excited to talk some ACC hoops today, and you know, I gotta share a little personal update here. This is my first podcast since my wife and I welcomed our first child into the world. We had a little boy about a week and a half ago. His name is Theo. It's not after Theo Pinson, although I'm not gonna lie, that is slightly influential to his nickname. Actually named after my grandfather, so shout out to him. But yeah, trying to get back into a little bit of rhythm when it comes to podcasting, especially doing our Heat Check Hangouts. It's been a few weeks. Connor, anything new on your end, man? I feel like I asked Russell how he was doing. I know you mentioned the zoo, but do you want to share any child updates on your end? How's EJ doing?
Just that 1-year-olds grow at the same rate that they always have. So we just bought new clothes, bought some stuff so I can take him biking. I've already been hiking with him a few times. And Riley, when Theo starts to move around by himself and has his own personality, it's great. It is also exhausting. So, no, but it's great. Yeah, just my birthday was 2 weeks ago. Actually, yeah. So he and I are like a week apart, and just trying to get back into the swing of things like you, right? The almanac, I know, took a lot of time, especially, you know, the closing stretch before the almanac released took a lot of time out of our schedules. I'm going to start doing West Coast Wednesday articles again. I know the next one, what it's going to be. I'm going to do kind of category by category, position by position, Gonzaga versus St. Mary's, because I know that's going to be one of the hottest debated, who's the best team in the conference in the country, probably. There's a lot of people high on St. Mary's, a lot of people high, obviously, on Gonzaga. And so I'm going to try and go through and see kind of who has the advantage there. But just look for more articles from us. I know Heat Check is going to start ramping up now that the almanac is out.
Yeah, there you go. And that's a nice little tease for West Coast Wednesday. And we will use that as a transition to a conference that is expanding westward. I was going to say we'll go to the opposite coast, the Atlantic coast, for really the last year before it is the all-coast conference. But, you know, at the same time, keep the name ACC just because I'm petty like that. Big 12, Big 10 doesn't have to change, so why should we?
Already wearing my favorite ACC team's hat, so we're all good there.
All right. So do we want to start by talking about Cal or Stanford, or no? We can talk about
the less we can talk about those schools, the better. I don't even know if I want to talk about them on the Pac-12 podcast. So let's keep them off the ACC one.
I will say Cal is the one school for however long UNC is in the ACC. I know that they'll probably leave eventually, but Cal is the one newcomer who I'm like, they might be able to add a little juice when it comes to basketball, just because there is a little bit of a history there. You know, you don't have to look too far back to see that Jaylen Brown and Yvonne Rabb team. You got, am I forget who's their I feel like I'm forgetting a big time pro from Cal Berkeley. Jason Kidd?
Yeah, he went to
Yeah,
Cal.
Okay.
unfortunately.
Uh, I'm like, I know I'm forgetting a big name, right? Sometimes I mix up like, anyway, which of those old time, like, I guess he's not that old anyway. But yeah, with what Mark Madsen has done even in one offseason there, that's one program that I think might bring a little juice to the conference. But we'll
Yeah,
see.
I mean they'll be middle of the Pac-12 probably, but that's not saying much about the Pac-12 outside the top 4 or 5. So
Well, and if Mark Madsen leaves Cal, it would be for Stanford, who will also be in the ACC. So he's
Right.
going to be
Yeah.
an ACC coach regardless, probably.
So either way, we got Mark Madsen for the long haul. All right, let's get into the actual conference. Let's get into the teams that will be competing in the ACC this year. I wanted to open up by just saying, when you look at the landscape of the league, this has obviously been a maligned conference over the past 2, maybe 3 years now. It feels like it's been eons since 2019 when the league produced 3 number 1 seeds, and it's been the butt of a lot of jokes. But is that something that you see changing as you look at the conference this year, or is there anything in particular that jumps out to you about this league ahead of the start of the season?
No, it's still going to be maligned. I think it'll be better because Duke will be better than they were, and the teams at the bottom, like Louisville, will still be bad, but they'll be better than they were. Like I just don't think we'll have those teams down to the bottom dragging down as far. Like Notre Dame is not going to be good, but I don't think Shrewsbury is going to let them completely go into the dregs, right? So I mean, you're looking at like if the basement of the ACC is higher and the best team is better, then the conference will be better. It's just a matter of will they win those out of conference games. And as we'll talk about, I just have a lot of questions about coaching just across the conference. Just tons and tons of questions abound, even by people that I think have good acclaim from the media and people were excited about when they joined, haven't been getting the results. So like at a certain point, you either get the results or maybe you're not fit for that team for this conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like we'll talk more about that as the individual teams come up as we discuss, but like yeah, I am not excited. I think once again the ACC is just above the Pac-12, maybe maybe we can get back to being the 5th best conference. Woohoo! That sort of deal.
See, when I look at this league, I think that there's a chance we might end up getting 7 tournament teams. I think the top 7, maybe even top 8 could be solid. There are 6 teams that I would say I feel pretty strongly that they should make the NCAA tournament. Then there's 2 more after that who I think will be bubbly. And then you get into teams like Wake and Florida State, who I think should at least be like frisky and can at least put up a fight against some of those better teams. That's my hope, is that, you look at teams 1 through 9 or 1 through 10 or something that can sort of buoy the league and not drop Q3 losses like in the non-conference. But I have a lot of hesitancies about Louisville. They should win more than 4 games, but like for them getting to double digits, I don't know if I see that happening. I think Notre Dame's going to struggle to get to double digits. And I love Shrewsbury. I think Shrewsbury is going to immediately one of probably the 3 or 4 best coaches in the league, but it's just that roster is so bad. So I think the bottom of the league could again sort of lead to some of that reputation, but the league's middle is in a better place than it's been in years past. But how about you, Connor? Where are you on that?
Yeah, I mean, and having a contender kind of fixes all issues, fixes all ills when it comes to how people view a league, right? And I know last year it was supposed to be North Carolina, but looking back in hindsight's 2020, we were picking a team that kind of, I don't want to say they snuck into the tournament because obviously they were a 9 seed. 8 seed.
Give us that respect for one more seed line.
But they went on a great run and then got worse from a roster perspective. I think like we were viewing them as this great team, but the Manic losing Manic was one reason why they were not as good last year. It was not the reason, right? But it was one reason. But Duke just gets better, and I think if they truly buy it, and granted, it might start rough, right? And that's something you have to expect with a team that's going to be reliant on a lot of freshmen. Although they do have a good core with Roach and Proctor and Filipowski, assuming that he comes back and is 100%. That I think this is a team that could make a run. Now, I know Riley and I were one of two of like three people in the Almanac that didn't have Duke as a Final Four team. Sorry, Russell, but I honestly think that they are one of the top 3 to 5 contenders for a national championship, and that in and of itself, especially if it plays out throughout the year and isn't just Miami making a run to the Final Four, UNC making a run to the Final Four, I think that's going to cure a lot of the ills that the rest of the league has. Obviously, Miami looks to be maybe not as good as last year, but pretty good, a solid top 25 preseason team. North Carolina's right on the edge of the top 25. I wouldn't fault you for having them in, wouldn't fault you for not having them in the top 25. Virginia, top 35-ish team. And so those 4, I think, are going to be pretty solid. I'm not on the 7-team train with you, Riley. I think it's probably more like 5 or 6, just because I think there's a lot more questions with the rest of these teams, right? Clemson should be pretty good, but we say that about Clemson every year, and they are just good enough, but not quite good enough, if that makes sense. Like, they're just quite good enough for Brownell to keep his job, but not quite good enough to make any impact on the rest of college basketball. Syracuse, you're relying a lot on Judah Mintz, and we'll get into that later. And then I agree. I think Notre Dame's going to be pretty bad, but Shrewsbury's a really good coach, and Louisville's almost the opposite. I feel like Louisville's roster is getting a little bit better, but I have no faith in that coaching staff with Kenny Payne. So I think this is a league where if you're focused on the bottom, you're going to be pretty disappointed. You're going to be like, this is a bad league. But if all you care about is having that one team that can break out and make an impact on the sport, I think Duke is one of those teams. And I think that at the end of the year, if Duke makes it to the national championship game, people are going to be like, oh, the ACC was good. I mean, that's what helped them the last 2 years. It's like they had a Final Four team in each of the last 2 seasons. And it's like, oh, maybe the ACC was actually good all year. Right. And I think that if that plays out over the course of the year rather than just in March, people are going to be a lot higher on the ACC, I think, than they have been in the last 2 years.
I want to do the ACC had 5 teams beneath 160th in KenPom last year. I just don't see that happening again this year. Even with there were 2 sub 200 teams last year, I think that's a pretty safe bet again this year, even if I don't think either of Notre Dame or Louisville will be as bad as Louisville was last year. Still they'll be sub 200, but like I just don't see those teams right above them being in that like 170 to 190 range. I definitely could see them being sub 100, but I just think that the ranking overall is going to be higher again. Duke, topping out at 18th in KenPom last year, I think, or something like this. Is that right?
I think.
Yeah. So they'll be higher than that. I think UNC should be higher, although I guess we'll talk about UNC some later. Virginia, I think, definitely could be higher in theory. There's just some interesting stuff there dynamic wise. I don't think that that'll change the media perception. They'll just look and say, oh, 5 tournament teams, this is a bad league.
Yeah.
And in ACC history, that's correct. But in terms of comparing us to last year, I do think the ACC will be better.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's something to like about pretty much every team except Louisville, right? Like, you've got Shrewsbury coming into Notre Dame. I have always been a huge Damon Stoudemire fan as a coach. Back to, when he was at Pacific, he was probably my 3rd favorite coach in the WCC behind, obviously, Mark Few and Randy Bennett. Pittsburgh, they're going to be worse, but if they're your 13th best team, 12th best team, that's not the end of the world when it comes to a conference's standings among the national landscape. Florida State, say what you want about the roster. I mean, they still have one of the best coaches to ever do it at the helm. Wake Forest, who takes on 2 Gonzaga players who kind of found their way out of the rotation, at least at least Efton Reed found his way out of the rotation at Gonzaga. But I like what Forbes has done at Wake Forest. So like this is a good league. I think it's better than the Pac-12. Even if the Pac-12's bottom, it sucks too. So I was going to say, even if the bottom's worse than the Pac-12, but Oregon State, you put them in the ACC and they're probably the worst team in the ACC. So no, I think the ACC is rising, and it's not going to play out maybe for another year or two, but I think it's definitely resurging, at least when it comes to college basketball.
I could make the argument for Louisville fans too. I mean, like, they have talent and they have guards this year, which is different, which is a nice change. So, I mean, if you have talent and you have guards, even if the coach is bad, then, that's something.
Yeah, we'll see. Honestly, I think we spent a little too much time talking about Louisville for my preferences. So let's go ahead and start talking about the big boys. We we brought Russell in to hit on Duke, because I'm assuming that all three of us have Duke number one in this conference. Even though Connor said that I didn't pick them to make the Final Four, which I'm standing by. I'm not picking them to make the Final Four. With Kansas dismissing Arterio Morris, I think Duke is my number one team in the country right now. I had Kansas ahead of them, but I think that.
But you're still standing by them not making the Final Four.
Correct. Yes. I think they will be.
Why is that beyond UNC fandom? I want to know. I want to know why. Like, is it just youth? I mean, like, I think youth was brought up earlier, and I think this year will be an interesting. There'll be an interesting dynamic because the returning experience minutes are high. Right, the returning experience minutes are going to be higher than they've been in a long time for Duke. Although the general D1 minutes experience is still probably going to be like sub-median in Division One, the like returning, the continuity is going to be really, really high. So that's an interesting dynamic in terms of like the youth element as it pertains to Duke this year.
Yeah,
I have also always had them number one and not a Final Four team. And for me, it's not necessarily the youth, because I can deal with youth. I have become a very strong proponent of, I need to know point guard play is going to be elite to win in March. And I'm not sold on Jeremy Roach being
he's not the point guard
guy.
He's not the point
well,
guard.
then it's what? Caleb Foster? I mean, if it's Tyrese
Proctor, dude.
Tyrese Proctor, yeah. But I need to buy into Tyrese Proctor, and I do. I mean, we did an All-American draft, and I took him at the number 2 pick.
I heard.
But like, I just don't. I'm just not sold on the guard play yet, and I need to see it. And if you look at my Final Four teams, it's Kansas, and say what you want about DeJuan Harris. Like, I trust him as a playmaker at the guard position.
Yeah, I'm fine with Kansas. Kansas belongs.
My two national championship teams, it's Michigan State against Marquette, and I don't think you could argue that the guard play there is elite. The only one that maybe you'd have a gripe with is Purdue as my 4th Final Four team, because again, I'm buying into the guards at Purdue. But for me, they have the player of the year, and they have 2 sophomore guards that I think are going to break out in some sort of way. So Duke would be my 5th team. I just went through, and those were the 4 that I came up with.
All right, Connor, it's I make no mistake about it. I don't want Duke to make the Final Four. I delight to cheer against them. It would be incredible to watch them flame out in March. However, I gotta say that, like, you can't say you don't trust their guards when you're picking a man in Shaka Smart who hasn't won a tournament game since the Bush administration to make the national championship. Or excuse me, hasn't made the second weekend. Dang it, that was a fun little fact that I butchered there. But yeah, hasn't made the second weekend since the Bush administration.
And Purdue, I mean, I like Painter. It's going to be increasingly hard, I think, for these teams with big men who can't leave the rim to play in single elimination tournament, because like you're going to find a team that can just like space and spread you out. And then if they're making their jump shots, then like you having a guy who eliminates everything at the rim with sheer size, like threes are worth more than twos, like I think Purdue is probably has a great case for being the number one team overall in the regular season. I think they will obliterate teams in the regular season. But I do think they'll do better. Last year was obviously pretty fluky as it came down to it in the tournament, but like I think what they did in the tournament against Purdue is also kind of the recipe. Like let Zach Edey get his stuff inside, like make it as tricky for him as he can. But like if you can take away the rest of the stuff and you're not reliant on scoring at the rim, then like what can they do at that? Like what can Edey do at that point? Like other than try to put up 30 and 20 and hope that that's enough and that the other team misses enough jump shots. So it'll be interesting for them going forward, I think, just in general with how Painter likes to play with these massive bigs.
So I think that even ties in a little bit to Duke's season prognostications and like how they might fare in March. So for me, with one of my biggest questions, I have them number one in the country because I think they have the most talented roster of anyone. The reason why I had Kansas ahead of them to begin with was just because I trust Bill Self as a coach more, and I didn't think there was that much of a drop off in the two rosters. But again, losing Arturo Morris, I think that's a pretty big blow to a backcourt that doesn't have a ton of depth. So that's why I'm favoring Duke for now. But as far as like the overall questions, I think Derek Lively was so important to what they did on defense last year, just having someone like that to erase shots at the rim. And the fact that they were able to play him alongside Filipowski, and Filipowski was sneakily awesome on defense last year. I don't know if many like non-ACC fans realize that you couldn't really put him in a ball screen and expose him or anything. But I think having Lively there to cover up mistakes, it allowed, Proctor to be a little more aggressive, allowed a little bit more pressure on the perimeter and everything. And even though I think Filipowski is a really versatile and good defender, he's not the rim protector that Lively is. But Russell, do you think he has some of that ability to at least be serviceable at the rim and then give you enough mobility to switch that even makes him more like makes Duke more like matchup fluid when it comes to a single elimination tournament?
Yeah, Flip's not really my concern on the inside. Obviously, like the biggest problem last year, which was addressed with the hip stuff, is like he couldn't jump. It was really clear that he would like miss some bunnies at the rim. He couldn't jump at all. And, he has said multiple times since his surgery, like he feels like a new guy and he should be able to have some ups. But like the way that John played switching scheme last year, even with Lively would go out there and do some switching, some high hedging. I think Flip is totally fine with that. I think Flip's got some of that. And he's also just big, right? Like it's the sort of thing like, this is such a lazy comparison because they're both just like big and versatile and like white appearing, but like the way that the Nuggets use Jokic defensively is like kind of what Flip probably needs to be, right? Like not a pure stand at the rim, swat everything guy. That's not his strength, but he's really smart and he's really big and he can take up space and use his hands well. And I think that that's enough. I'm really not that concerned about Flip. My bigger concern defensively is if Duke ends up playing a lot of Jeremy Roach and Jared McCain together. That's just a small lineup. That's really small in a game where it's kind of going more wingy and more size, more length. Roach is not a good defender. We know this at this point. Proctor's a really good defender. Mitchell, really good defender. McCain, I don't think you can expect to be a good defender as a freshman coming in. So Roach and McCain together is the highest ceiling offense, I think. They might just be the number one offense in the country with the three of them and not care that Roach and McCain are getting blown past. But I think it would help Duke a lot if Caleb Foster makes enough threes that they can play him with Roach and then McCain with Proctor and do some combinations. It'd be great if Jaden Schutt could be anybody, again, because he's 6'5", he's got some size. My biggest concern, all the Duke fans are concerned about not having a Mark Williams or a Derek Lively. I think the wing depth is way more of a concern to me. If something happened to Mark Mitchell, I mean, we saw last year what happens when Mark Mitchell's not there. Like we got smushed by Tennessee. It just happened. I think that game goes very differently if a healthy Mark Mitchell's out there. And this year we don't have really any depth there. We got a lot of 6'5" guys. Sean Stewart isn't a 3. He's great defensively. I think he could be a really good 4 wing side protector defensive guy, but offensively, he's not that. He's a rim runner. TJ Power, I just don't expect a lot of right away. I know Jeff Goodman was high on him early, but like, we'll see. If he could come along, that would be great. But like right now, it is going to be a lot of Mark Mitchell against us sort of guys. And if we encounter those teams that have, like a Miami, for instance, that might have like three guys that play on the wing who are like in that 6'6", 6'7" range, playing Roach and McCain against those guys is going to be really problematic. And so in a single elimination tournament, I think that is my bigger concern more than the interior play. I think with like Dickinson or whatever, you just double him and make him be a passer and make Kansas shoot threes, right? Like I think that there are scheme things you can do for like big man oriented teams with Flip just because he's so damn big. But the wing stuff, Mark Mitchell just needs to be healthy and play 30 plus minutes a game. And then on top of that, it would be great if a Caleb Foster could emerge to the point where he's playing 25 minutes a game, something like this, because he's 6'5", he's got some length, got a little pop to him. So, or Sean Stewart, if the offense comes along, anything like this would help at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned both Caleb Foster, shout to TJ Power, because I've been thinking that Jared McCain's going to be that dude. Like as far as like the best freshman, I'd pencil him in. I figured he would be like that third guard starting in the lineup. And I get the concerns with the smaller lineup on the perimeter, but even looking at the ACC as a whole, there's not a ton of teams that have like 6'6" wings that are trying out there. I think you're going to see a lot of lineups, like including UNC, of guys where that perimeter unit, there's no one really taller than 6'5". Like even, I know you cited Miami, and Keyshawn George has been getting a lot of buzz for him, and he's a 6'8" freshman coming in, played overseas. But outside of him, even Miami has a lot of like 6'4", 6'5" guards. But yeah, so I've always thought that McCain was going to be the one because his highlights are insane. I know he was the best player in California, outplayed Bronny and other highly ranked prospects out there. But even looking at the almanac, I know Goodman had Caleb Foster as a projected starter. And I know, it's no secret Goodman has his sources. He has the assistant coaches who he's connecting with and everything. And that caught me off guard a little bit. But Russ, who are you thinking aside from, like, who do you think will be the most impactful freshman? Or what are you?
I got to think it's McCain because of the shooting and the floor spacing. Like Flip just needs space to work. And the shooting obviously wasn't good last year. It got better as the season went on. Proctor shot, 37% from three down the stretch. Roach, once he becomes a catch and shoot three shooter, is a lot more effective than when he's pulling up off the bounce. Mark Mitchell was fine. I think was percentage wise our best shooter, but it just looks ugly, but it goes in when it's from the corner. So who knows? You just need Flip to have some room to operate inside. And so I think McCain is probably the move. Brendan Marks of The Athletic just had a mailbag like a day or two ago where he thought now that McCain would be the fifth starter, that he's at least in front position to get that spot. But at the end of the day, I think Caleb Foster is going to also play like equivalent minutes to McCain would be my guess. Foster looks really good. All he's got to do is shoot like 35% from three. And if he can do that, he does enough of the other things really well that he'll be really impactful. And I've got a huge man crush on Sean Stewart. I've been like absolutely pounding the drum for Stewart, especially when it comes to people being concerned about Duke's interior depth. Like if Flip gets into foul trouble. Sean Stewart is only like 6'8", and yes, he's a freshman. He can jump out the gym, and not just jump out the gym. Like he's got good timing. He's got great hands. Anyone who watched his high school tape knows, like at bare minimum, weak side rim protection would be absolutely elite. Like he's not going to stop Hunter Dickinson on a post up, but nobody is. So like I think he's going to do fine in ACC play in that respect. And then obviously Christian Reeves can just be like a big body if you need. I kind of think Mark Mitchell could play some small ball center like sneakily if necessary. So not really worried there. But Sean Stewart, I don't expect much on the offense other than pick and roll, like rim running stuff. I know he did a little mid-range jumper stuff in high school. I think that'll take some time. But the athleticism is insane. And he's the kind of guy that, let's say the mid-range jumper works or he shoots like 33% from three or whatever. He's the sort of guy that might really shoot up draft boards, I would think. Just like you can't find guys with that body who move like that and jump like that. Like you can't teach that. So, McCain is a guy who probably is the most polished college player coming in. but he's also a guy that like we see really good 6'3", 6'2", 6'3" guards not be anybody in the NBA really and kind of get cut pretty quickly. I mean, and for a guy like McCain who makes a lot of money in NIL or, whatever, I think people are really hyped on his NBA one and done potential, but like I think he has to be like a Steph Curry level freshman to be a one and done. And if that's the case, then Duke's going to win the title, and like it doesn't matter. So I'll be fine if that happens end of the day. So yeah, McCain most impactful, but I wouldn't sleep on Stewart. It's
a good take. Good take. Yeah, a lot to like about that team as far as their depth, their talent, the pedigree. Let's turn to the rest of the league, and I think there's a big debate that could ensue at who takes that number 2 spot. But Connor, who do you have as the second best team in the ACC?
Neck and neck. I have Miami as the second best team. I think we saw it last year. Granted, they do lose players, so I'm not going to ignore that. I like what UNC has coming in, but Norchad Omier is great. Like if he's your top option, you've got Matt Cleveland coming in. Wooga Poplar, I think, pops off. I think he could become, I don't want to say the first option. He could become the second option and be a really good player. Obviously, we've seen Nigel Pack, make shots from anywhere on the court his entire career in college basketball. So I like this Miami team. I think they throw that interesting wrinkle that you mentioned, Riley, in that they're going to have a starting 5 where not a single player is over 6'7". But their bench is long. Like their starting lineup is going to be small, and then they're going to pull these big dudes off the bench. You've got AJ Casey at 6'9". You've got their 2 freshmen who are 6'8", 6'10", coming off the bench. But they're a team that first 10 minutes, they're going to come out and they're going to try and put points on the board. And I don't know how many teams in this conference outside of Duke and maybe UNC and Virginia, because of the way Virginia plays defense, but those two can actually keep up with Miami and the way they're going to start in the first 8 to 12 minutes of a game.
Yeah, I'm really high on this Miami team. I think I had them fringe top 10. I can't remember where I ranked them for the Almanac, somewhere in that top 15, top 20 range, if not a little bit higher. But yeah, Nigel Pack, I think for his whole career, he's been that flamethrower who can get to his shots whenever, can shoot off the bounce, can shoot off the catch. And I love that you mentioned Wooga Poplar. I did the top 25 breakout players for the Almanac, and he checked in at number 6 for me. I think even you look at his leap from, I want to say from his freshman to his sophomore year, 2 years ago, he was almost unplayable on offense. And last year, he was just catch and shoot assassins, got good athleticism, and became one of the better perimeter defenders in the league. And I think it speaks to Larinaga's track record when it comes to player development. But I'm with you, man. I think I would be surprised if he doesn't emerge as that second option next to Nigel Pack. What about you, Russell? What's your take on Miami?
Was Miami your number 2 team, Riley?
Yeah, it's mine too. How about
you? Miami's my number 3 team. I also don't have UNC as my number 2 team. For the record, little spoiler there. Yeah, Miami just hadn't had a top 15 KenPom team since 2016. I'm really skeptical of the offense without Wong and Miller. Like, just 2 of them. So many times last year, you just watch them bail out the offense, like with an unbelievably difficult shot or getting to a space that they created out of nothing, right? Like that, I don't know. Like Poplar's really good, but like Poplar's not Isaiah Wong, and like Matthew Cleveland is definitely not a substitute for either of those guys. Lower O rating than Caleb Love last year. Sub 70% from the free throw line too. And like Miami's huge strength last year was they're a top 10 free throw shooting team in the country in terms of percentage. So, I mean, I think they'll still like finish top 30, top 40. I think the top 3 guys, Pack, Omier, Poplar, they're probably the second best trio of players you're going to find in the ACC. Larinaga is obviously a very proven coach, top 2 coach in the ACC at worst. So, I still have them pretty safely top 3, but I do have sort of some questions in terms of like, I think people, have top 10, top 15 excitement around them. And I think they're more like in that sort of 6-ish seed, 7-ish seed range. Like, maybe somewhere in there, maybe a little boosted because the ACC is not going to be very good. So they'll rack up some wins, but I'm just not as excited. But I also wasn't excited last year. I famously made a bet with Ryan, the Duke Nation, who I do a show with on Twitter, that Houston was going to beat the pants off Miami in the tournament, because I have no faith in their defense ever. They're not a good defensive team. They won't be a good defensive team again this year. Like, I just don't think they will be. And then they beat Houston, and I lost $100 worth of craft beer to my buddy Ryan. So maybe take any of my skepticism with a grain of salt, because I tend to just always think a little less of Miami than they end up doing at the end of the day.
Brian and I famously, we had a preseason long shot national title contenders episode in like August of last year. He picked San Diego State, I picked Miami, and is the one time both of us looked pretty smart at the end of the year.
It's hard to bet against them in the tournament, but also the last 2 times they went on runs, they had Isaiah Wong. Like,
yeah. With Miami, though, I know you say that their defense is always bad, and like there was that game, I think last November or December, where they gave up 100 points to Cornell. And I don't know if Larinaga was one of the guys complaining about the net. It wouldn't surprise me if he was. I love Coach L. I don't mean that as a shot, but it's like, also, if you're going to don't give up 100 points to Cornell, then you won't have to complain about the net. But I always thought that Miami, for their defensive issues, kind of over these last 2 years, they've had a knack for making big plays. Like, they can create turnovers when it's needed. Like that, I think that's bailed them out and helped with like having, I don't know if they were sub 100 defensively this year or if it was like sub 75, sub 80 or something, but I know that they were bad. But they
were 99th.
Oh, okay. Wow.
But before the tournament started, they were definitely sub 100.
Yeah. So I think they're going to be able to create turnovers. I think for your concerns, Russell, I know you voiced that you don't think Cleveland can do much without the ball in his hands. I think he can do a lot defensively, just as like a weak side rim protector and aiding Pack, sort of shoring up that interior defense. Like the way he covers ground really quickly. He's obviously got great vertical pop and everything. I don't think he's a Jordan Miller replacement, because Miller was so clutch with his shot making and just always seemed to make the right play or the big play.
And he was a good defender. He was one of those guys with the knack for the big play defensively. I mean,
Cleveland might be able to do at least some of the defensive stuff, but
I just when they're not a top 10 offense, like, what are they? You know what I mean? And like, I know they're going to have weapons. It could happen still. But again, a lot of my projection stuff comes down to like, are they better than they were last year? And like, I don't think they are. And they were like a 5 seed last year, and the ACC is going to be a little better. So then like, where do I put them? You know what I mean?
I mean, that's a fair pushback to my top 15, top 10 take, but I am curious, Russell, who is your number 2 team in the ACC?
I mean, it's got to be Virginia for me. Like, agnostic of roster. Like, they have finished with a top 2 ACC record 8 of the last 10 seasons. I mean, like, what am I supposed to do with that when Miami has lost their 2 best shot creators? And UNC, we've got some questions about what they're going to be. Clemson, questions about them. I think Virginia's just the safest bet. The offense is going to suffer without Kihei Clark there. I think there's no question that the offense is probably going to be ugly. But, like, the defense is going to improve. Like, Kihei Clark is tiny. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that Bennett's worst 3 defenses were all with Kihei Clark playing serious minutes. It's kind of like how Miami's worst defenses were when Chris Likes was there. Like, little guys just get abused, and it just is what it is. So, like, I think this team can once again, like, find ways. Like, I know that a lot of those guys that are on the roster don't, like, project to be, like, elite defenders, but, like, neither did Kyle Guy at the beginning or whatever. Neither did Ty Jerome. Like, you know what I mean? Like, guys learn. Guys figure it out over time. I really like McNeely. I think he is a guy who seems poised to become like a really annoying shot maker who's just going to really piss me off. Dante Harris is a very wild card kind of guy to have on that roster. But I also just I think he's house money at the end of the day. Like, even if he's not much, I just sort of trust the institution that Bennett has built there to win regular season games. Do I think this is a team that will go as far as Miami or even Carolina in the tournament? Maybe, probably not, right? But like in terms of racking up ACC games, if they only lose like 5 ACC games this year, would I be surprised? Like, no, not really, because it's Tony Bennett. And every time one of us goes like, well, the roster doesn't look that great, 2 or 3 guys end up being good enough, and then they end up being top 2 in the ACC. So it's just a bet on the institution, simple and plain.
I mean, I have thoughts on Virginia. I think I have them ranked 5th, so pretty big disparity there. But I want to turn it to Connor first. What are your thoughts on this Virginia team?
I have them 4th, and that's because of Tony Bennett, and I love Reese Beekman, and I think I was the one who famously said I'd rather have Reese Beekman than DJ Wagner as my point guard, just because you know what you're going to get out of Reese Beekman.
I don't hate that take. I don't know that I love it, but I don't hate it. I think it's fair enough.
I don't know how well any of these players that are transferring in outside of Dante Harris is going to translate to the ACC. Andrew Rode, Jordan Minor. I don't know. They're not big. They were good at Merrimack, and where did Rode come from?
St. Thomas.
He came from St. Thomas.
Yeah.
I mean, they were good there. I don't know how they'll translate to playing. You know, they'll have to 2 games against Filipowski and Proctor and Mitchell. 2 games against Armando Baker. Like, how are they going to compete at an ACC level? I like the backcourt, but like Jake Groves, he's proven to he's just a guy. He's just a guy. Is he their 7th man in that rotation? I mean, that's what the Almanac has him as. I think Jeff Goodman put that together. Like, I don't know. I think the system has me more confident in them than the roster outside of that backcourt does. So I like the.
I was going to say, I think the answer to the Flip and Baycott questions are you pack it in and you make them shoot threes. Like, you know, like you throw doubles on them and you make Harrison Ingram make threes. You make Mark Mitchell make threes. And, you know, and maybe that works and maybe it doesn't. I think institutionally there's a big question going forward as teams get better and better at shooting threes, how viable the pack line will be like 3 years from now, 5 years from now. Maybe that turn is coming sooner. I think that's a good argument for maybe why they wouldn't be top 2, top 3. But yeah, I mean, I think the answer to the how are they going to guard big men is like they're just not going to guard them on an island.
Well, and then my other question there is, and this might be just something to throw out there. This might just be something to throw out there, but like, what is, and we talk about this all the time, like teams that when they score this amount, they win. When they score that, like, what is Virginia's defense? Like, if they hold opponents to this amount, that's kind of the delineation between their wins and losses. Is it low to mid 60s? Because I don't trust this offense at all.
Yeah.
And so like they're going to be a team that like I think 65 is the number. Like if they hold teams under 65, which Virginia's done in the past, like that could very well be in the cards, and that could be in the cards this year. But I don't know. I just think 65, if that's like the number that they're shooting for offensively or defensively, I guess. That's a very dangerous game to play, especially against teams that like a Miami that can just put points on the board, a Duke that is presumably just going to put points on the board. Their saving grace is
how many teams can put points on the board in the ACC?
I was going to say that their saving grace is the rest of the ACC.
There you go. Yeah, that's my argument.
Hey, while we're speaking about putting points on the board, I just want to let it be known that Hubert Davis is 3-1 against Tony Bennett so far. So just gotta let my piece known beyond that. But with this Virginia team, Russell, I get where you're coming from with the institution. Like it's tough to not trust Tony Bennett. I know there have been speculation like online in the college basketball spaces, has he lost his fastball? I don't think so. I think he's just going to have to adjust because he can't really redshirt players anymore, which like for the better part of the 2010s, like DeAndre Hunter to me is the prime example of this dude who redshirted and came out of nowhere and was, I mean, I vividly remember him like dunking all over UNC, and all of a sudden he was just an all ACC guy going forward and was a stud. But this roster, I think it lacks that type of high-end talent. It lacks those dudes who are just killers. Like there's no Malcolm Brogdon type. There's no Kyle Guy, Ty Jerome type, the guys who are just going to like take your soul on a basketball court. And I think Isaac McNeely can get to that point. I just don't know if that's going to happen this year. Maybe that's a bold prognostication for McNeely ever, because he's, you know, not really the type of on-ball threat that Brogdon or Kyle Guy or Jerome was, but he has a little bit of that to his game. And I mean, I even like someone like Andrew Rohde for maybe not this upcoming year, but next season. But it's just tough for me to get past the fact, like he played high level AAU basketball in high school. I'm pretty sure he was AAU teammates with Seth Trimble. So he had big eyes on him coming out of Wisconsin, and he ended up at a Summit League school. And I know he was really good last year at St. Thomas, but I don't know if he developed enough to get past like kind of how he was viewed coming out of high school. Like I think there's some upside there that he can be a primary initiator at some point in his Virginia career. But yeah, I just have too many questions with how it's going to translate this year. Like I saw this Virginia fan account on Twitter complaining that Bart Torvik's algorithm projected Andrew Rohde to average 7 points a game, which I was like, dude, that would be a fantastic year for Andrew Rohde if he put up 7 a game in Virginia's slow tempo. Like that's what they need from him. Like I don't think they're going to get more than that.
Scorer on the team if you score 7 points a game. Yeah, I like Minor. Yeah. He was Defensive Player of the Year in his conference. I'm not saying that's going to translate to the ACC, but like I think that is a decent indication that he could at least be a guy defensively.
Yeah.
You know, and I really just kind of think that's all they need. They don't need a top 3 like that pop off the page if they're going to be a top 2 ACC team. They just need to be a top 15 to 20 defense in the country, and like. Maybe they can't be that without a Jay Huff or what. I mean, Ryan Dunn's really good too. Like
Ryan Dunn is nasty. I love Ryan Dunn.
I think there's people who could just like every year there's a guy on Virginia's team where like, I don't know if he's and then he is you know, so like that's really all it boils down to for me.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it is Dunn who makes that step. I love it. 7'1" wingspan. He was also on my breakout player list. I think I had him top 15. Like he's a freak defender, and I think could be that next, like, you know, he's a different type of player than Mamadi Diakite or Anthony Gill or Isaiah Wilkins, any of those interior guys. Jay Huff, you mentioned, but can still provide some of that shot blocking and maybe even a little more beyond that.
Think if Harris is of what he was in that Big East tournament, right? Like if you could just harness even like a percentage of that and get that kind of shot creation, like Virginia would kill for that, right? Like,
yeah, that's fair.
That could just take them over the top, really, if he becomes, you know, what his potential suggests.
Harris is the fastball for Tony, who is very much a knuckleball coach. So
sure.
But if I agree with you, if Harris breaks out, then I mean all bets are off. Like Virginia could, they're not going to beat Duke, but they'll, I think, be a top 2 team. But again, it's just you're relying on a lot of up transfers, and you're relying on Harris breakout. And we thought their offense was going to be better last year than it ended up being. So until I see it improve, I'm gonna hedge my bets and put them forth. I understand they finished top 2, top 3, like you said, 8 of the last 10 years. But I trust the ceiling for Miami and UNC a little bit more.
They tied for the regular season title last year out of shenanigans against Duke in a game that Duke rightfully would have won in that moment.
I forgot about that.
Not bitter.
All right, we can talk about we can go ahead and get my team out of the way, since I have them ranked 4th. We haven't talked about my number 3 team yet, but Russell, where are you at on UNC in your rankings?
I have them 5th. I think 4th and 5th is a coin flip, really, because my number 4 team has injury concerns.
Is 4 Clemson or someone else?
My 4 is Clemson. Yeah,
Clemson's my 3.
Like can PJ Hall just stay on the floor the whole season, right? Like, and if so, then I would put them above UNC, but also that's a tough ask maybe for a guy who tends to get nicked up here and there. So, you know, coin flip, I put Clemson ahead because I like the upside. Same argument that I made with Miami. Like you're getting Caleb Love out, maybe addition by subtraction, but it's a reclass freshman. And I think that even though he might be better by the end of the year, and he certainly will probably be a better decision maker, reclass freshman point guards, it's tough. I mean, even Proctor last year for the first few months really struggled. You're replacing Leaky Black with either Cormac Ryan or Harrison Ingram. I don't think defensively you can make a substitute for Leaky Black and what he brought to the table. And Pete Nance, I know UNC fans like to ride him some, but like I think Pete Nance would be a better defensive player than Cormac Ryan. Not that Cormac is gonna be awful or anything, but like he doesn't have Pete Nance's size or what have you. So I mean, like if you've got a team that was 11-9 in conference last year, I think you could make the argument that unless Hubert plays his bench, that this roster might be worse. Then what are you going to do? I kind of think the defense is going to suck unless Baycott really like blows up defensively. It comes down to that bench. Will Hubert actually play them? He should have last year, and he didn't, and it cost the team dearly. And will he change his ways? I don't know. That's the real question. I trust Brownell more than Davis. That's the other reason why I'd have Clemson above UNC at the end of the day.
Connor, what are your thoughts on Carolina?
I mean, I still like the talent. Like I like the talent of Elliot Cadeau. I get the arguments that Russell made, but I like the talent. I like the talent of RJ Davis. I like the talent. I like the IQ of Harrison Ingram. We all know who Armando Baycott is. I still think Seth Trimble, Jalen Washington can be something
if they play.
And I like the two up transfers. I like Wojcik. I like Withers. I think if Withers can harness his shooting from last year and not his shooting from 2 years ago, like that's a boon to the offense. I am not gonna mention Cormac Ryan because I could go on for 5 minutes about why I don't like Cormac Ryan, but.
I like that you called Jalen Withers an up transfer, by the way.
Well, yeah.
Oh man, yeah. I mean,
Brown was better than Louisville last year, right? So if we're calling,
probably, yeah.
Brown was probably noticeably better than Louisville, but yeah. I have all the same concerns that y'all do. Like, I don't have UNC ranked top 25. Part of that is because I don't think they deserve it. Part of that is because I don't want to get my hopes up for like the 5th year in a row. But yeah, I think like when you look at just who RJ Davis, Armando Baycott, Elliot Cadeau is, that's a excellent trio, assuming that Cadeau can sort of mitigate some of those transition issues that reclass freshmen have. I think what works in his favor is he's either 19 or he'll be 19 by the time the season starts, has international experience, so he is old for his grade, old for his original grade. But yeah, I'm with Russell. I think the defense is really going to struggle unless they play really aggressively and pressure more. This is just like the deep dive on UNC's defense in the 2022 tournament that no one asked for. But if you go back and watch that game against UCLA, they played so aggressively, switching on ball screens, hedging on ball screens, being active with their hands. It was completely different even the following November, like when they played Gardner Webb in the 3rd or 4th game of the year, where they played this super conservative, deep drop coverage with Armando that just got eviscerated. And it was actually like the same defensive scheme they ran at the start of Hubert Davis's tenure when they got lit up by Brown and Paxton Wojcik 2 years ago. So I think there's really no choice for this UNC team other than to be a little more aggressive on defense, to maybe mix in some full court press, to play a no middle type of scheme to mitigate some of their size disadvantage. So that's like one of my biggest concerns is the defense. I do think the offense is going to be awesome. Like I think they shouldn't really have an issue being a top 20, top 15. I'd say top 15 offense. I would bet on that nationally. I think RJ Davis he's a flamethrower, dude, when he's healthy.
Davis is great. Baycott is great. They were 51st last year.
But that's because they shot 31% as a team. Like Cormac Ryan, I think will shoot probably 37, 38%. Harrison Ingram is a 40% 3-point shooter off the catch for his career, and he's not really going to be creating off the bounce. Like,
if you'd said top 25, top 30, I'd probably be fine. The top 15 is, they're not even going to be a top 3 offense in the ACC, probably. Like,
I think they will be. I think it'll be Duke and then them. I think I'd take Carolina's offense over Miami and Clemson.
21-22
Clemson
was
versus UNC is an interesting board bet on offense right
I
there.
will take you on that. I think we'll be better.
Clemson, everyone can shoot. Everyone.
Yeah, that's fair, but
Like, they're going to be a top 10, 15 3-point team in the country.
21-22 was also, I think, the exception to the rule with Cormac Ryan.
what did he shoot that year? Like 38, 39%?
No, he shot 41% in 21-22, has not shot over 35% in any of his other 3 seasons.
Well,
three.
I'm just going to focus on the season I liked then and tell you to go on youtube.com and search Cormac Ryan, Alabama NCAA tournament and watch him hit seven
that's
threes.
The thing. That's the thing, right? We put a lot of stock in
You
UNC.
do the same thing with Caleb Love, Riley.
Yeah. The 22 NCAA tournament was crazy with how many teams and players popped off that then proceeded to not continue that pop off into the next season. The one thing I will say with this UNC team is that, especially with Caleb Love gone, like they have RJ Davis, Cormac Ryan, Harrison, like Cadeau, they could all make plays for others. And so I think the ball movement of this offense is going to be really good. Much better than it was last year at times because you don't have Caleb Love. But the shooting, I think, is going to be somewhat of an issue. And so you're passing up good shots for great shots. They need to, across the board, with the exception of their 2 transfers, Wojcik and Withers, they need to, across the board, improve that shooting because Harrison Ingram, like Russell said, you force Harrison Ingram to shoot. He's a 32% 3-point shooter. I'd settle in at 35% for Cormac Ryan, probably. And RJ Davis, 37, 38?
Yeah, but he's like a 45% shooter when his hand is not broken.
Yeah,
that's
fair.
That's the loophole. That's every UNC fan's favorite loophole is like RJ Davis had a sprained thumb for half the year last year, and his numbers when his thumb wasn't taped up are like phenomenal.
So
and Jeremy Roach is always hurt. Otherwise, he'd shoot 40% from 30. Yeah.
I love how fans.
I do think, and this might be a hot take, but I think if a Duke player doesn't win ACC Player of the Year, because I do think it's going to be Proctor or Flip, I think Baycott is that guy. And that's why I'm a little bit higher on UNC, because I do think he is probably the 3rd best player in the conference. But we'll see.
I think from a production standpoint, he's going to be pretty clearly the 2nd best player in the conference. I don't have an issue with that. I think he can put up 20 and 10, and UNC can still be the 5th best team in the conference. I also, as we're talking about narratives here, I think the Caleb Love was like the only issue when it came to like selfishness on the team narrative that has gone out there. That might not be the case. I mean, we'll find out this year, but like, I think it's very presumptuous for people to be like, just because he took the worst shots, that he was the only one taking bad shots. Like, RJ Davis can take some bad shots. Like, he's a better shooter than Caleb Love, but he also forces it up there. Baycott can sometimes just get lost and just decide he's going to do whatever the hell he wants to do.
I agree.
Coming in, like, we don't know what they're going to be in a Hubert Davis system. It might also be, part and parcel of the coaching. I don't know, but like I think there's a good argument to be made that it'll fix a lot of those issues. But they were 310th in assist rate last year. I mean, if they go really high up in the course of one season just because Caleb Love left and just because Pete Nance, who was kind of a ball stopper, left, I'd be pretty surprised. Leaky Black was a good ball mover. You're losing him. Like, I don't know that some of the guys coming in are necessarily going to be better at finding people than Leaky Black was.
I agree there. I think one argument that could be made is that when your star player or when your point guard or whatever is such a ball mover that sometimes you force shots because you might not get the ball back.
Sure.
And I think when you have
ties together, yeah,
it's which comes first, the chicken or the egg, right?
Yes.
But I truly think that Caleb Love going to Arizona could open up, because I think RJ Davis, Baycott is going to be Baycott, right? And bigs like him sometimes can be ball stoppers, but I think RJ Davis has shown the willingness to pass. It's just when you put him side by side with Caleb Love, and when you have that much talent and you're struggling that much, and every player thinks that they can be the player that puts the offense on their back, it's I think a little bit of a struggle to say, they're all bad at ball movement. I think we can definitively say that Caleb Love isn't a good ball mover. And I think, like, I agree. The jury is out on RJ Davis and Armando Bacot, but just watching Harrison Ingram, he's a willing passer.
Really good passer.
He's a high IQ player. I think he just hasn't delivered on his talent. But every time you watch Stanford play, he seemed like one of the few players on the court that was always in the right place, always making probably the best decisions. Stanford just, again, Cormac Ryan sucked at Stanford. Harrison Ingram was mediocre at Stanford. So I think that might also be a Stanford problem more so than a Harrison
It'll be
Ingram.
interesting to see how RJ Davis is when he's the main focus, right? Because Caleb Love obviously has the size to sort of be the guy who takes a bunch of shots. RJ Davis being considerably smaller, now definitely drawing like the best defender on the team, especially in those early months when Cadeau is probably not going to be much of a scoring threat. It'll be interesting to see how RJ Davis responds to the types of defenders that will now be thrown at him.
Yeah, those are fair points. I'm actually going to have to pass the hosting duties off to Connor because I got to go tend to the baby. But I'm sorry to jump off here, and we've gotten through like 4 or 5 teams in the league. But the last thing I will say about UNC is that Armando Bacot slimmed down a lot this offseason. And again, go back and watch that UNC UCLA game when he's like that size. He looked way more mobile than we ever saw him last year. And that's what a good chunk of my hope in UNC is that we're going to see a more lean and limber and like that Bacot with the motor that he showed throughout that 2022 tournament. But
yeah,
I'm sorry,
UNC might be a Miami situation where they play to the level of their opponent. They played Alabama all the way to the wire last time.
Yep. So let's see.
I figure we could just go through. We'll probably spend some time on Clemson and then just hit.
Yeah, sure.
So Clemson, I think you said he had them second or third?
He had them third. I have them fourth.
I have them fifth.
Yeah, pretty simple argument for me. I think the offense is going to be great. Lots of shooting, especially PJ all healthy, game changer. Defense probably going to suck. I'm not super stoked on the defense, especially with Gerard. I think Gerard is dreadful, especially now that he's going to be out of his zone. I mean, he's going to be picked on constantly. But they still scream like 8-9 seed to me, and I think that Brownell doesn't get enough credit. Like at the end of the day, he has the best win percentage in conference play of any Clemson coach ever. And he's finished top half of the ACC 6 of the last 10 years, and he's at Clemson.
Yeah.
So like
that he is to
he
me
deserves
the Tad Boyle. He's the Tad Boyle of the ACC. I think there's a definitive ceiling on Colorado that Tad Boyle always kind of hits. But I think Brownell's the same way. Is it a stretch to say that, maybe outside of Duke, but is it a stretch to say that this might be the best 3-point shooting team in the conference?
Them or maybe Virginia Tech. Yeah. One of the two.
Because Gerard's a good 3-point shooter. Hemingway's a good 3-point shooter. I like, I think 3-point shooting transfers. So like Heidbreder from Air Force, I think when I look at shooters who up transfer, and I still think Mountain West to the ACC is an up transfer. I don't know. Didn't the Mountain West finish ahead of the ACC last year in Ken Pom? They might have.
They did.
But I think 3-point shooting transfers because, again, it's not a sticky stat. So like 3-point shooting defense only goes so far. If Heidbreder is just that spot up shooter and that's all he is for Clemson, I think that's perfectly fine, especially off the bench. So I like Clemson. Again, PJ Hall's a stud. Like it's going to be tough for most teams to defend him. To defend Chase Hunter. I have the same issues defensively. Like Gerard is that flamethrower. Like he's great offensively, but defensively, it's just he's small. He's not. I don't think he's going to do well in a man.
No,
defense.
he won't. Who do you have? Maybe just like run down your rankings after your top 5, because I think we just went through your top 5, and maybe we can pick a couple teams to talk about that are interesting.
I have after that, so my tiers are basically I'll do tier it too. Duke, and then Miami, UNC, Virginia, Clemson are all in kind of one
Sure.
clump. My next tier I go back and forth: Syracuse, Virginia Tech, NC State as the next tier. I think Syracuse is talented. I'm not sure what the coaching's going to look like, which is the only thing that's giving me pause. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, like people are putting a lot of pressure on Judah Mintz to go from being the guy to the guy. Like they're all this praise of Judah Mintz. I think he's one of the best guards in the conference, but outside of him and JJ Starling, like there's not a lot of proven offense on this Syracuse team. And when we don't know what the defense is going to look like, are they going to stick in the zone? Are they going to go to a man? Like, what is this going to look like? I'm on the fence. I think they're a NCAA caliber team, 10, 11 seed caliber team. I just don't know what this team is going to look like outside of that backcourt.
Sure.
I don't know
be top. They could be top 3. They could be top 10, top 11. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Yeah, I'm high. I'm way lower on NC State than you are. I don't have a ton of time. I really want to just like touch on a couple of things super fast. I guess we'll touch on NC State. I have them like 11th. I'm so low on NC State. They don't have Joyner Smith anymore. Brutal. Burns their best player can't play more than 22 minutes a game. They'll beat Duke at home. They will. But like, it's Kevin Keats' last season, in my opinion. Like, I'm tired of pretending that this has worked out. They've been a top 40 team 0 times. They've had a single-digit loss season 0 times. The only time they have had a top 25 adjusted offense or defensive rating was 2018, and they were a 9 seed. Like, they were better under Gottfried. They were better under Herb Sendek. They drove Herb Sendek out of there. This is what you get situation for NC State, because they made 5 tournaments in a row with Sendek until he left in 2006. They've made 6 total since then, right? Herb Sendek had top 30 teams 4 of his last 5 years. They have never been a top 30 team since. I think it's time for him to go. They got to find a coach that can raise the ceiling, because Keats is clearly not that guy. I think I loved him at Wilmington. I thought it was a great hire. It just hasn't worked out. He's a great mid-major coach. He's a 9 seed, 10 seed ceiling coach in a bad ACC. So I'm low on State. I think he's done.
I think their top 6 are pretty talented. Like, as far as ACC teams go, I like Horn. I like
They're always
Taylor. I like
talented,
Jara.
though, Connor. They're always talented.
Yeah, but again, we're talking about like if I'm splitting hairs between them and Boston College, or them and like Stoudemire's first year at Georgia Tech. The team that I'm lower on than I think a lot of people would be Pitt. But like, this is a team that I think has the talent to finish. I have them 8th. I think they're like barely clinging into that. Maybe I stretched and put them in that Virginia Tech, Syracuse tier, but like, I like that starting 5, and I can't look past that when it comes to some of the other teams in the conference.
Yeah, I think they'll be fine offensively. I think they'll be bad defensively. They never impress me. I have Georgia Tech and Boston College basically on the same tier as State. I acknowledge that State's roster is more talented, but I also think that I kind of like the best player on Georgia Tech and the best player on Boston College more than the best player on NC State. I don't know. I'm pretty low on them too. I'm 13th on Pitt. I think Capel's done. You can't lose Cummings and Barton and still be good. The team I'm higher on than most, that I have them 6th really, because I just don't know where to put Syracuse. I have Wake Forest. I just kind of think like the last 2 years they've been right on the bubble, on the wrong side of it, granted. And you could argue maybe he's underachieved because he's had a couple of NBA talent players on these teams. I think Monsanto's an NBA player. Clintman's an NBA player. Obviously they had LaRavia, they had Williams. He's got the talent. I think this year he's got talent too. It's just another year where I think they'll just be like right outside the bubble. It's kind of why I think ACC only gets 5. Does Reed play? I don't know. Probably
I don't think
not.
so.
And if so, then they're probably below Syracuse, maybe, but I just don't know where to put Syracuse. Monsanto has to be healthy also. But also I wouldn't be surprised if they like finished ahead of UNC. Like there are more NBA players on the Wake Forest roster than the UNC roster, and the coach is better at Wake Forest than it is at UNC. So like, at the end of the day, I think it's a bet on Forbes and sort of where he's tended to live and the talent that is on the roster.
Yeah, so with Wake Forest, to me, this might be another hot take. This will be my bold prediction of the show, and after this, I'll ask you about your bold prediction. With Wake Forest, for me, I think Hunter Salas has a higher points per game average than Judah Mintz, and so maybe I should put Wake Forest ahead of Syracuse. But I think the one thing Wake Forest has done is it has turned out star guards. I think Hunter Salas flashed that at Gonzaga. He was just stuck behind some really good guard play in the rotation. I think Forbes unlocks that, and you see him break out in a way that some of the other guards on this team have. So
yeah, I think
that's going to be my bold prediction. Yeah. I guess we'll end it here. What's your bold prediction for the ACC?
Man, I think I let out with a lot of my biggest ones that I'm really low on State and Pitt. I'm higher on Wake than most. Bold prediction. I also just think that I think this will be, here's a bold prediction. We'll get a turnover of 5 or more coaches this offseason in the ACC.
Are there 2 or 3 that you're for sure thinking are going to turn over?
Yeah. I mean, I think Capel has got to be done. I think Payne has got to be done. I wouldn't be surprised if Keats is done. Larinaga is old. Hamilton is old and doesn't seem to want to be there. Also, I think people overrate Hamilton. I kind of I forget if it was you or Riley who said something about Hamilton earlier. His mean KenPom finish is 56. The median is 38. Yes, he's good. He's definitely good, and he's got a style which makes him memorable and cool. But he's made the second weekend 4 times in 20 years. He's made the tournament only 4 of the last 10 years. He's a good coach, but I just don't know that he's unless he has multiple NBA players on the roster, which he doesn't. Then they tend to not make the tournament. So it comes down to talent with him in a huge way. So I mean, if he left, I wouldn't be surprised. If Larinaga bounced after this year, I wouldn't be surprised. And there's always there's wild cards in there, right? If Clemson doesn't make the tournament, then maybe they move on from Brownell. I sneaky kind of wonder at what, I know he hasn't been there that long. At what point does Mike Young have to do something? You know what I mean? He is building these rosters that would dominate the SoCon, but in the ACC are very aggressively mid. They're going to be good analytically, but they're not going to win games because they don't have athleticism. They don't have that guy really most of the time. And the defense and rebounding are always bad. I don't think it would be this year, but if Rice got hurt or something, then the bottom could really fall out for them, and maybe that'd buy him another year. But the point is, there's a lot of dudes that are on very tenuous ground here. Hubert Davis, so there's a lot of dudes that could go. So I think 5 or more coaches this offseason no longer being on their team next year is my bold prediction.
I could see it. Well, that will do it for us. Thank you all for tuning in to the Heat Check Hangout. Myself, my co-host Riley Davis, and our guest Russell. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Duke Better on Twitter. Duke by the Numbers is my podcast that maybe we'll record again soon, and I've got some very cool Duke related announcements coming up very, very shortly. So follow on Twitter because we're gonna have some very cool shows and stuff lined up very soon.
So that will do it for us, and we will see you guys next time.
Basketball. Basketball, basketball, college. Basketball, basketball, college. Oh, is that time already? Whoa, basketball, college. Basketball, basketball, college. Basketball, basketball, college.